The following program was recorded at WERC's annual conference in Orlando, Florida. I'm pleased to welcome Supply Chain Brain Editor Emeritus, Jean Murphy.
Hello. Today I'm speaking with Greg Holt, Director of Product Marketing at CombineNet. Welcome, Greg.
Thanks, Jean.
As you know, I recently had the pleasure of moderating a webinar that you co-hosted with Jason Bush of Spend Matters, and that was all about using procurement strategies to deal with the volatility and rapidly rising price of commodities. Tell us a little bit about that environment and what you're seeing and hearing from your customers.
Yeah, certainly commodities are a big challenge for all companies right now. Whether you're a manufacturer that's buying a lot of steel, a food company, or even just a retailer or a non-manufacturing company, commodities are having an impact on your business. And that challenge is being placed directly on the laps of sourcing and procurement professionals at these companies. If you look at steel, for example, if you're a manufacturer that's buying steel, whether it's domestic or international supply, you're seeing price increases over the last 2 years upwards in the 20% range. And that's having a very large impact on the cost of your goods sold. Food manufacturers, food service companies, the cost of foodstuffs, corn being a very obvious commodity that we've seen price increases that are quite significant over the last few years. It's really impacting the cost of what it is that you're manufacturing and putting on the shelf for consumers. And for non-manufacturing companies, commodities are a big concern as well. Obviously, everyone as a consumer sees the cost impact of the price of oil in the fuel that you're putting in your vehicle. So even if you're not manufacturing with commodities and raw materials, if you're shipping anything, your cost of supply chain is going up because of the cost of oil and the cost of fuel, regardless of what mode you might be shipping in. But if you look beyond commodities, there's some other things that are in the works as well. If you look at the cost of labor, especially for manufacturing companies that have moved manufacturing offshore to China or other countries in the Asian Pacific Rim, labor costs we've seen in the last couple of years, we have seen some examples of upwards of 20 and 30% increases in labor costs for those low-cost labor countries. And what we're actually seeing as well, what we've read about is some of those companies that provide that outsourced labor are moving inland in China to find lower cost labor, finding new workers at a lower rate. So regardless of what it is you're manufacturing or you're bringing to market, commodity increases, labor costs, and fuel costs are all having a very big impact on your business.
And how are companies dealing with this other than just passing along the cost?
They're doing a number of things. Some industries in particular have done a very good job of not passing costs on to the consumers. One example is the food industry. You've seen some food price increases, but probably not at the scale at which their raw material and commodity costs have gone up. They've done a nice job of kind of cushioning some of that increase to the end consumer. I think we'll probably see some increased costs passed on to the consumer in the automotive and the high-tech market. Not simply because, but partially because of the earthquake, tsunami, and resulting nuclear crisis in Japan. It has particularly hit those industries very hard. And it's going to take some time to bring that capacity back online. But in general, what a lot of these companies are doing is they're really focusing on the spend that they can control. As Jason Bush mentioned in our webinar, anywhere, depending on the industry, anywhere between 20 to 80% of your cost is based on costs that the buying company cannot control. It's tied up in raw material and commodity costs. And they really don't have control over that. What they can control, though, are the other costs that go into their supply chain: manufacturing costs, transportation costs, different ways that they can work with their suppliers more collaboratively to reduce costs beyond that commodity price. And we provided a couple of examples of how you can do that within the webinar. But that's certainly what a lot of our customers are doing, is focusing on that cost where they can have some control.
Can you give us a couple of examples of that here as well?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you one example in particular, but really it's beyond kind of any specific example. I think what companies really need to be focused on is working more collaboratively with their supply base. The supply base knows their business very well, and they have some some very unique capabilities to innovate and drive efficiency into your supply chain if you are the manufacturing company. One example we gave is a food company, certainly hard hit by the rising cost of commodities. And many of their products are packaged in steel cans, so another commodity hit that they're taking in terms of the rising cost of steel. Well, traditionally what this company had done is bought steel coil from their suppliers, both domestically and internationally. That steel coil was brought in to one of their manufacturing plants where they would cut it into sheets, they would laminate that steel or lacquer it. Then it was shipped to another plant where they would actually produce the cans that the food would go in. And then the final leg of that part of their supply chain was shipping those cans to the food production facilities to be filled with a final product to be sold to customers. What this customer did was actually look at different ways they could work with their suppliers to drive out costs beyond the commodity cost, the cost of steel. And so they went to their suppliers and they asked them for different ways that they could help them become more efficient and reduce cost of production. And they asked their suppliers to come back to them in a much more kind of strategic sourcing activity and look at ways that they could not only provide the cost of that steel coil, but perhaps they could laminate that steel coil before it was shipped to the manufacturer. They also asked them to look at what if there were capabilities on the supply base to pre-cut and pre-laminate that steel. So actually driving out some of the production processes that the manufacturer would do on their own. And in addition to that, they also looked at some other things around fuel. They looked at things around transportation and freight. So traditionally, the steel supplier would provide the freight to the manufacturer, but the manufacturer is a large company. They have very extensive freight contracts with carriers, so they also wanted to look at what were those freight costs. At the end of the day, what they found out was that their steel suppliers had pretty great capability to provide them with some additional service and additional value. And they were much more efficient at actually doing some of that production process. So they ended up shifting from buying steel coil from their supply base and manufacturing the cut and lacquered steel sheets. And they actually asked the supply base to do that for them. So now the supply base is providing pre-cut, pre-lacquered sheets directly to the can manufacturing plant, cutting out some of those inefficient processes the manufacturer was doing and reducing costs. And on top of that, they were able to identify a number of transportation lanes where they had better rates than their suppliers did. So they could also reduce costs that way. So it didn't necessarily completely offset the rising cost of steel or the rising cost of their food ingredients, but it was able to help significantly.
So what role does CombineNet play? Do you help them identify those opportunities?
We help them create the marketplace within which they can identify those opportunities. Our solution is an advanced sourcing application platform, and it really focuses on opening up a marketplace for more expressive and creative proposals from suppliers. So by being able to have a conversation with Eugene as a buyer and a supplier, you and I can be very creative and flexible in how we can negotiate, how we can talk about different solutions to problems. And what our solution allows is for companies to do that on a very large scale and be able to collect expressive bids from suppliers that allow suppliers to put their best foot forward, drive innovation and efficiency into the supply chain through their own strengths, their own innovations, and what they've been able to come up with as their own business improves. And our customers are using that to tap into their supply base to find other ways beyond just the cost of the material or the commodity that they can reduce costs within their own business.
So do you think companies are going to be living in this kind of volatile pricing situation for their supplies for some time to come?
That's a great question, and it's a very difficult question to answer. And certainly there are a lot of economists and analysts out there that have a lot of very educated opinions. I recently sat through a session on commodity prices at a conference, and the economist that was speaking said that there are some silver linings to the cloud. In particular, steel prices are not going to be going down, but the rate of growth is going to slow. So most likely we'll see single-digit increases in price for steel this year, and actually potentially some reduced costs in 2012. And it's really due to the fact that demand in construction and infrastructure in both mature nations as well as growing nations is slowing down. And so that's going to have a big impact on steel. Fuel costs and oil costs, that's a very volatile market, and the economist anticipated that that's going to continue to increase, but we may see some relief in 2012 as well.
All right. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Gene.
I've been speaking with Greg Holt of CombineNet. Thank you for watching.